Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. US immigration agents shoot and kill a US citizen in Minneapolis, sparking protests and condemnation from local leaders. The Department of Homeland Security says an agent fires in self-defense after the man approaches with a handgun and resists disarmament. Minnesota state investigators say federal agents refused to let them enter the Minneapolis shooting site despite a judge-signed warrant, deepening tension over immigration officer action. The refusal comes as local leaders push for independent review of federal actions after multiple fatal shootings in the city this month. Myanmar's military chief defends the election as final voting takes place in the country, with the military-backed party already holding large parliamentary majorities. Major opposition groups boycott the polls, while the UN and rights groups denounce the vote as a sham to entrench military rule. US, Russian and Ukrainian officials hold constructive talks in the UAE on possible parameters to end the war. Negotiators agree to report back to their capitals and return for another round on February the 1st. Donald Trump threatens a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods if Ottawa strikes a trade deal with China. The warning comes as US-Canada ties strain after Canada announces a strategic partnership with Beijing. Rescuers in Indonesia search for 80 missing people after a landslide kills at least 10 in West Java. Authorities say heavy rains trigger the slide and warn bad weather could continue for days. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung withdraws his pick for Budget Ministry Chief. The move follows backlash over allegations of abusive conduct and controversial property dealings. US climber Alex Hanold free solos Taipei 101 without any ropes, completing a 91-minute ascent up one of the world's tallest skyscrapers. The climb is organised and live broadcasted by Netflix and draws thousands of cheering spectators. We start this hour once again in the United States, and the Minnesota state officials are at odds with the Trump administration over the latest incident of a shooting involving federal ICE agents. In Minneapolis, a Border Patrol agent shot and killed Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old US citizen, on Saturday during an immigration enforcement operation. The Minneapolis police chief, Brian O'Hara, has addressed the ongoing unrest, urging people to remain peaceful despite widespread anger. Let's listen in to his statement.
We urge everyone to remain peaceful. We recognize that there is a lot of anger and a lot of questions around what has happened, but we need people to remain peaceful. In the area, we have an unlawful assembly at this time. Minneapolis police have given multiple warnings for the crowd to disperse. We are asking for people to avoid the area and to leave if you are there.
Chief O'Hara has revealed that his police department has been in contact with Homeland Security, but no specific details about the incident were provided. Moreover, Senator Amy Klobuchar, along with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, has also joined the call for the removal of federal immigration agents from the state. Let's listen in.
Our message is really clear and straightforward. We need ICE out of Minnesota. They are not making us more safe. As the tragic killing this morning, as people saw it viscerally on that video, shows us, they are making us less safe. This is completely out of whack, completely out of balance, and now 3 people have been shot, 2 resulting in death. 1, Renee Good, mother of 3, and now Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old Minneapolis man, a citizen, also a nurse.
Meanwhile, mourners gathered in Minneapolis yesterday night to hold a candlelight vigil to honour Alex Pretty and call for an end to the ongoing violence in the city. Let's listen in to one of the attendees at the vigil.
It's just been really beautiful tonight to see all the people in our neighborhood coming out to show their support for Alex Pretty, who was killed, and to say no to the violence and harm that is being spread throughout our communities.
Joining us now in this discussion to talk about the ongoing situation in Minnesota is Lieutenant Colonel Himanshi Singh, a Defence and International Relations Analyst, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Lieutenant, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. Of course, this situation is ongoing and has proved of the divide between the federal government and, of course, the lower state authorities. I say lower, however, the governor of the state has opposed the Trump administration's actions and ICE's presence in the cities in Minnesota. How do you see this situation developing, and what would be the right thing to do when it comes to de-escalating the situations in the Twin Cities? Of course, we've seen mass opposition from Minnesota state officials and equal opposition from the Trump administration and his officials. What are your thoughts on the situation?
Thank you for your question, Thomas. Minneapolis today reflects a very deeper crisis within American governance. And in a matter of weeks, 2 civilians, as you've stated, have been killed by the federal immigration agents, triggering protest and political outrage and a shutdown. And it is so serious that NBA game has been postponed. So public anger is not about immigration. It is also about the use of force, lack of transparency, and federal agencies operating without local accountability. That we have seen the way both the parties have been putting allegation on each other. So when IC conducts militarized operation in residential neighborhoods and local authorities, they are denied access of evidence. So people are not being given, any evidence. And this is where people get offended, because they don't see the law enforcement agencies as protectors. They see them as imposition. So that is why the slogans like ICE out of Minnesota or Minneapolis are resonating. And somehow I feel, they have a way forward. The way forward could be that independent investigation, clear rules of engagement. These agencies have to have clear rules of engagement. They all have body cams on their body, so they have to provide the proof, because we have earlier seen the people were shot when they were trying to get away and not trying to be in confrontation with the ICE. So they have to have federal-local coordination and a genuine community dialogue where both the parties understand the situation in totality. And without accountability, without enforcement, this will keep breeding a lot of resistance from the people. And police is using not just the tear gases, but the way they have been firing. And the way they have been coming down heavily on the protesters who are unarmed is something very, very disturbing. So I feel without trust, this institution will not work, and they need to get into some situation where those agencies, the community safety and civil liberties, both are taken into consideration. So I think the federal versus the local government's dynamic has to be very, very amicable, and that's how we can overcome this crisis.
And much like last time, of course, we've seen the likes of Christine Noem and other officials from the Trump administration immediately defend the ICE operations actions here before an investigation has concluded. J.D. Vance, of course, previously, after the shooting of Nicole Good, said that ICE agents have complete and utter immunity. Does that risk these ICE agents being above the law?
See, nothing is above the law. ICE has to follow the protocol. They cannot go on random shooting of people and enter people's houses without search warrants, and don't give them evidence of their fault. So if a credible, independent investigation with local and federal cooperation comes into the process, then the trust will be established. Because whether JD Vance is trying to justify what ICE is doing or any other person, it does not hold legally on the terms of legality. So anything which is above the law has to be brought down to the justification, and clear rules of engagements and accountability have to be fixed. Otherwise, this internal crisis of Minneapolis and the other city will be a very, very disgraceful for the American democracy. Because on one side, America goes on telling other people and other countries like Iran that they are trying to come down heavily on the protesters, whereas we see the similar things in America happening, which is a champion of democracy. So this is very disturbing. So they need to revisit and clarify the use of force protocols, especially by the federal agents, and especially when they are working in domestic and urban spaces, and the accountability has to be established. Otherwise, more civilian harm will be done, and it is more like a cold-blooded murder than overcoming a protest.
Yes. Lieutenant Singh, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. We turn to Latin America, and in Venezuela, it aims to boost oil production by at least 80% this year through major reforms that open its oil sector to private investors. The new draft hydrocarbon laws, approved in its first parliamentary reading, would upgrade decades-old rules and allow private and potentially foreign firms to explore, extract and market oil under contract. The state oil giant, the PDVSA, says the changes are designed to give investigators and investors legal certainty and revitalize output that once peaked above 3 million barrels per day. The reform is widely seen as a shift away from strict state control under previous governments and comes amid pressure from the United States to open the energy sector. Meanwhile, interim President Delcy Rodriguez also called for dialogue with the opposition to foster national unity, saying peace and stability must come before political differences. Listen into what the interim president of Venezuela had to say.
Le exhorté e invité al presidente de la Asamblea Nacional a que active todos los espacios para los encuentros políticos en Venezuela, con todos los sectores políticos, sectores opositores, sectores que son y están con el gran polo patriótico, con el chavismo. Bueno, desde las diferencias tenemos que hablarnos con respeto. Desde la diferencia tenemos que encontrarnos y alcanzar acuerdos. No puede haber diferencias, ni políticas ni partidistas, cuando se trata de la paz de Venezuela. No puede haber divisiones. Tiene que ser Venezuela como un solo cuerpo nacional.
This, of course, comes after pressure from the United States following the capture of President Maduro has, of course, increased. Cooperation between the United States and Delcy Rodriguez's interim government has seemingly gone quite well as of so far, but of course we don't know what's going on behind the scenes and which strings are being pulled by the United States and of course the CIA operations inside Venezuela. This is a big development as it will let the potential of companies come in and work inside Venezuela, which has the largest known oil reserves in the world. Of course, the United States wants to come in and work inside Venezuela. Donald Trump even floating the idea of running the entire country and controlling the oil which lies underneath its ground. So this new draft of a hydrocarbon law, it's been approved but in its first parliamentary reading. This is unknown whether how much pressure is being put on by the United States in regards to this. Of course, we'll continue to cover this story coming out of Caracas and the rest of the country as soon as we get the information. But it looks like Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's former president, is bowing to US demand when it comes to this, where and looking to gain confidence in US companies which have been reluctant to invest inside Venezuela after the capture of Nicolas Maduro, calling it politically unstable. And so this will give the US oil companies more of a reason and more confidence in investing inside the Latin American country, which has, of course, seen political instability for decades under the Maduro government and previously. Donald Trump seems to think that Venezuela has huge potential despite its damaged infrastructure and, of course, socialist leadership, which is currently in power. He has said good things about the current discourse which is going on between US officials and Delcy Rodriguez's administration. There is a huge, what Donald Trump calls an armada waiting outside the Caribbean. This is seen to be putting pressure on Venezuela to move in the way that is indeed moving. Okay, we're going to move on now and head over to the Middle East. And Iraq's main Shia alliance, which holds a parliamentary majority, endorsed a former prime minister and power broker, Nouri al-Maliki, as the country's next premier. Al-Maliki is set to return to power today amid seismic changes in the Middle East, with Iran's regional influence waning and tensions with the United States rising. The coordination framework, an alliance of Shiite factions with varying links to Iran, has stated that it has decided by majority to vote and to nominate Maliki for the position as the candidate of the largest parliamentary bloc. The framework added that after in-depth and extensive discussion, the coordination framework decided by majority to nominate Mr. Maliki for the position of Prime Minister as the candidate of the largest parliamentary bloc based on his political and administrative experience and his role in managing the state. Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Singh once again to discuss this. What does this tell us about the political situation inside Iraq?
Thomas, the Iran political landscape is once again at a very, very critical juncture, and we know Nouri al-Maliki is a 75 years old Shiite veteran and a leader of the state law coalition. So he has been a prime minister previously, and he has been, he has a record of very, very controversial rule. So he has been accused of consolidating power and then raising tension with Sunnis and Kurdish communities. That is why, the ISIS also raised in that side of Iraq in the year 2014. So the latest development shows that now he is being backed as the prime minister. So now he may effectively lead the next government. But if we see from the geopolitical perspective, his leadership style, since it has previously deepens the sectarian division between Shiites, Sunnis, Kurdish. So his return may reopen a lot of fault lines unless inclusive government is approached. Then secondly, he has to gain support from the Sunnis and Kurdish to form the government, which is a very, very challenging task given the past mistrust. Then moreover, this ISIS threat is still there because it is a security challenge which is coherent, and managing it will be very, very critical. And as far as the relationship between Iraq and Iran are concerned, so he has seen being aligned towards Iran. So we have to see that if the Baghdad politics aligns towards Iran, then government which America is trying to build in Iran will be jeopardized, or maybe America will not be able to control the government which comes, because Iraq and US relationships are stable as of now. But if Iraq is not able to contain these unified Islamic groups which are terrorist and limit its influence, then it will be difficult for Iraq to manage this relationship further, because it may complicate the relationship between Baghdad and the United States, because the objectives are very different and willingness to balance the terrain for both of them is very, very different. So US will need a bigger cooperation from Maliki, and we have to see how it comes out, because a lot of things also depend on the oil revenues and the governance. These days we see Trump's obsession with oil, and Iraq also has oil, and they've already faced a war earlier with the US. So things are going to get very complicated with Maliki's coming back to power.
Indeed. Lieutenant Colonel Singh, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme, as always. We now turn to Myanmar, and its military rulers have opened polling in the final phase of a tightly controlled election, despite strong criticism at home and abroad. Voting began early today in Mandalay, the country's second largest city. Democracy watchdogs say the vote is designed to entrench military rule and not restore civilian democracy. The pro-military Union Solidarity and Development Party is on track for a landslide win. Junta chief Min Aung Hlaing defended the election, saying it reflects the will of the people and that voters are free to choose whoever they support. Listen in to what Myanmar's Junta chief had to say. A sprawling winter storm has grounded more than 14,500 flights around the United States, halting trains and triggering a grid emergency and knocking out power to thousands of people, all while threatening to drop a foot of snow on New York City and the rest of the Northeast Corridor. Meanwhile, more than 118,000 homes and businesses from Colorado to the Atlantic were without any power, with almost 102,000 of them in Texas and in Louisiana. As per reports, the massive storm is covering parts of 32 states and just about half of the US population. Cold, snow, sleet and ice have triggered emergency declarations. US President Donald Trump has approved federal disaster assistance to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Meanwhile, listen in to what the citizens had to say about the prevailing conditions.
If nobody shows up after a while, we'll probably shut her down. I think it's supposed to get a lot colder later, so we're looking probably 4 or 5 o'clock. Might wrap it up and then just see how.
Amid the intense winter storm, Jeepers Anonymous, an Oklahoma-based non-profit made up of Jeep owners, is braving icy roads to give free rides to essential workers. The group is helping transport hospital staff, hospice workers and employees at nursing homes who still need to report to work despite hazardous conditions. Let's listen in to what the president of the club had to say.
You know, people in nursing homes, they've got to be staffed because no matter what the weather does, people are going to need help. You know, the medical staff is constantly going. It doesn't matter what's happening outside, that ball keeps spinning. And we figured, hey, we can just get together and help some people out. It started last year with one cell phone. We did close to 1,000 rides with one cell phone, 12 Jeeps running 3 days. And so this year we jumped up. We got 7 dispatchers. We've got up to close to 30 Jeeps running the last couple of days. We'll run tomorrow.
Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.